So we've all heard the promise, right? A golden age for the US economy. But what's actually the plan to get there? In this explainer, we're going to break it all down. The good, the bad, the arguments for and against this massive economic boom, all based on what the top analysts are saying. Okay, so it all kicks off with this really bold promise from President Trump. He's talking about an era of growth, the likes of which this country has never seen. A new golden age, all driven by his economic policies. But you've got to ask, right? How? How is this actually supposed to work? All right, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at that golden age promise. Then, we'll dive into the tariff strategy and that big, beautiful tax law. After that, we'll cover the hurdles, because there are definitely some big ones. And finally, we'll get to the million-dollar question. Is this boom really coming in 2026? So, Section 1, a promised golden age. At its heart, the idea is pretty simple, really. It's all about making the United States the #1 absolute best place in the world to do business. The goal? To kickstart this huge wave of investment from companies, which would mean thousands of new factories popping up right here on American soil. And how are they going to do that? Well, the whole vision really rests on these three main pillars. You've got tax cuts, designed to get businesses investing. Then there's deregulation, to slash all that red tape. And finally, the tariff agenda, which is all about persuading companies to bring their production back home. Okay, let's get into the first big tool in the toolbox, the tariff strategy. And let me tell you, this is probably one of the most controversial, most debated pieces of this entire economic puzzle. So how is it supposed to work? The logic is pretty straightforward, at least on paper. Step 1, you slap tariffs on foreign goods, making them more expensive. Step 2, companies wanting to avoid those extra costs decide to move their production back to the US. And step 3, boom, a US manufacturing revival. But, and this is a really important but, they're not talking about just any kind of manufacturing. And here's where we get a really crucial piece of the puzzle. We're not talking about making Nike sneakers or cheap socks here. No, the focus is laser sharp on high-tech, high-value stuff. Think advanced robotics, semiconductor fabrication plants, things that are absolutely vital for national security. That changes the whole conversation, doesn't it? All right, moving on to the second big pillar of this whole strategy. It's a massive piece of tax legislation, and in the discussion we're drawing from, it was called the Big Beautiful Law. And just like the tariffs, the goal here is to make the U.S. an even more magnetic place for businesses to set up shop. But here's where things got a little confusing. A huge question came up. When do people and businesses actually get to see the benefits? And in economics, timing is everything. It really matters for understanding the true impact. So let's break down the timeline. The bill gets signed around July 4th. Now, some key deductions for business investments, they were actually made retroactive to the start of the previous year, which is a big deal. But, and this is key, the majority of the benefits, especially for regular folks, didn't really hit until January 1st of the next year. So you can see how that lag might have caused some businesses and consumers to kind of wait and see before making big moves. But even with that delay, wow, look at this. We've got some pretty clear evidence that the law is having a huge impact. Business fixed investment, which is just a fancy way of saying how much companies are spending on long-term stuff like buildings and equipment, it's shot up. Normally, it's around 15% of GDP. Lately, it's been hitting a remarkable 25%. That's a massive jump and a strong sign that an investment boom is actually happening. Okay, but it's not all smooth sailing. The path forward has some pretty serious bumps in the road. We're talking about significant legal and financial challenges that could, honestly, put this whole golden age vision at risk. And the biggest, most immediate hurdle? It's a Supreme Court case. Yep, the court has to decide if the tariffs are even constitutional. And until they hand down that ruling, which could be any day now before the end of June, there's this massive cloud of uncertainty hanging over everything. You can imagine businesses are just stuck in a holding pattern, waiting to see which way the wind blows. And it's not just the legal battle. There's also this huge fiscal question mark. We're seeing these big spending programs, farmer bailouts, those $1,000 checks, super subsidies. But the money for them isn't coming from taxes or revenue, it's being borrowed. And that naturally makes you ask, is this whole thing sustainable in the long run? And that's the real worry here. The concern is that if you keep funding all this stuff with debt, you could actually work against your own goal of a stable economy. As one analyst put it so simply, all of this money is actually inflationary. We're borrowing more money.
So this brings us to what might be the biggest question of all, timing. Let's say the plan gets past all the legal challenges and the money questions. When does the average person on the street actually feel this promised boom? When does it become real for them?
Well, the general consensus from the analysts is maybe not for a while. It seems like all the pieces of the puzzle, the investment, the deregulation, the shift in manufacturing, they're all being set up right now. But the real, full-blown boomy effects, we might not feel that full acceleration for over a year, with some thinking it won't hit its peak until 2026. And that, right there, frames this entire debate perfectly. It's not just about economics anymore, it's deeply political. As Brian's question puts it, the question politically, does that come in time? You've got this huge tug of war between a long-term economic plan that might bear fruit in 2026 and the reality of much, much shorter political timelines. So that's where we're left, with this central, nagging question at the heart of the whole thing. Are we watching the foundation being laid for an incredible American economic boom? Or is it a massive fiscal gamble that could leave us with a legacy of inflation and debt? All the pieces are on the board, but which future they're building, well, that's a question that only time is going to answer.